Marhaban. Hello. My name is Ian Campbell, and this is the 8th in a series of videos intended to teach you the Arabic alphabet and sound system and to prepare you to understand how to learn vocabulary words. In this lesson, we're going to learn 2 more letters of the alphabet, Sald and Dald, and a non-alphabetic character called Alif Madda. So let's jump right in and learn about Sald, which is a tricky thing because it's something that we don't really do in English. And I'm going to go into detail about this. So Sald is a connecting letter that makes the English S sound. And you're like, hang on, Ustav, didn't we just learn the letter Sin that makes the English S sound? And I'll be like, yes, we did. But this is a different S. It's an emphatic S. And what this means is it lowers the pitch of the vowels around it. And the only way to show you how this works is to give you a bunch of examples. So I'm going to go through how to draw the letters fairly quickly, and then I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of what this does. So drawing Sald is a little bit tricky at first. What we're going to do is we're going to make a big old loop like this that looks like the Christian fish sometimes people put on the backs of their cars. And then we're going to go down from here, and we're going to make a round tail, just like the tail that Sin gets. So here is the letter Sald. It's pretty big. It's one of the bigger letters in the alphabet. And it's important that you understand that you both have the loop and the little tooth that comes after it. A lot of students learn the loop pretty easily, but they neglect to learn the tooth, or they're not carefully explained why you need to learn the tooth, and then they create letters that can often be mistaken for other letters. And I don't want you to do that, so I'm going to harp on it right now, that it's the loop and the tooth. So Sald makes an S sound, but so does Sin. So you're like, well, what is the difference really? And let me explain it to you. Here is Sin Alif, here is Sald Alif. Here's his loop, here's his tooth, and only then do I make Alif. So be careful that you need the loop and the tooth. This is very important. So we're going to pronounce both of them like S. But what an emphatic consonant does is it lands a little more heavily, and it also lowers the pitch of the vowels around it. So the pitch lowers. So we would pronounce this one Sa, and we would pronounce this one Saw. So there's quite a difference between them if you compare them. But if you just hear one out of context, it's not always easy to understand which letter it is. So when I'm giving dictation exercises to students, for example, I'll really emphasize the difference between the Sin and the Salt. In everyday conversation, however, you don't really do this that much. So sometimes you're going to miss one word for another, and you're only going to understand which one it is from context. And I'm going to give you a ton of examples in a moment to let you understand how that works. So before we get there, though, let's make sure we know how to draw it. So when we're by ourselves, we already have the form up there, but I'll do it again. Big old loop, tooth, tail, just like that. And you've already seen what it looks like in first position up here as well. So again, big old loop, and then this is the key part. Make the tooth before you go on to the next letter. Don't just make the loop, because it's going to confuse people. People are going to think it's one or two different letters. When it's in middle position, it gets a little weird. We're going to come from the previous letter, and now we're going to make our loop, but we're going to make it at a greater angle to the bottom line a little bit, and then we're going to make our tooth, and then we're going to go on to the next letter. This definitely takes a little practice to do well, but I won't harp on it here. And then in final position, we're going to combine the middle position and the solo position by, that was a terrible one. Let me redo that, please. We're going to go up. We're going to make our big old loop at a higher angle. We're going to make our tooth. And then we're going to come around and make our tail. So this is the letter Sald. He's pretty big compared to a lot of the rest of the letters. But it's key that you have both the loop and the tooth. Otherwise, you're going to confuse people. And this is like the zigzag for ha, jim, or kha. It definitely takes a little practice to create this middle one. Before I give a bunch of examples, let's go on to Dald. So dod is also a connecting letter. It is the emphatic counterpart to Arabic dal, regular old non-aspirated D. That sod is to seen. So if I have dal alif and I have dod alif, and dod looks just like sod, except dod has a dot and sod does not. So here we have da, and here we have daw. And the difference is a lot clearer than the difference between seen and salt. So da, daw. The pitch is lower, and also you're pronouncing the D a little bit more deeply in your throat. Da, da, da. This sound is said to be unique to Arabic, and if you have something that's sort of showing off the Arabic alphabet, dod is usually the letter that is chosen as the representative. So we're going to make it just like sod, and we're going to put our dot on it. So you're going to make the same forms for both letters, only you're going to add the dot to it. So I can just take these, and I can not move them down. That didn't work. Never mind. We'll just put the dot on it later on. So that's how you make dod as opposed to sod. All you have to do is add the dot. Lastly, we're going to look at a completely different character, a non-alphabetic character who is called alif madda, extended alif, really alif of extension, if you want to be perfectly grammatical about it. And it looks like an alif, only instead of a hamza on top, we're going to put what is essentially the Spanish tilde on top, like this. In a printed text, a professionally printed text, this tilde is often really small and a little bit challenging to pick out. I'm not sure why. In handwriting, though, you tend to make it pretty big. So what this is what happens when you put an alif bi hamza and then another alif bi hamza right after it. It was decided long ago that this looked visually distracting or kind of silly, so they invented a new character to combine them. And this is the reason for it. It's also what happens if you put alif bi hamza and then a regular long vowel alif. Let's make that a little straighter. So this combination of characters, these two combinations of characters, it was decided that they looked silly, and so we make this character for them instead. It's not super common, but what I have found is that students I get often know the letters of the alphabet, but don't know the non-alphabetic characters very well. And that's kind of why I'm going through them one by one in this series of lessons. So let's take a look at our examples down below. And this one isn't going to be so much about cadence, because I think you've already figured out cadence by this point. It's going to be about the difference between seen and sod and dal and dod. So over here we have Sarah, and here we have Sora. Now, when you encounter a native speaker and you haven't yet got used to the pitch at which they usually speak, it's a little bit difficult just to hear the difference between these two words. Is he saying he went or marched? Or is the person saying he became, which is what Sora means? Hard to tell. You'd have to know from context. So definitely when you meet a new person and they're speaking Arabic to you, you have to kind of figure out what pitch they normally speak at so you can sort out when they go deeper, and that's a sod or a dod or one of the three other emphatic consonants that I'll get to in the next series of lessons. So Sarah, Sora. And here we have surah, and here we have surah. The difference is pretty subtle between them. Sod and seen are often kind of difficult to tell apart. So surah means image or picture. Surah is a chapter of the Quran. So usually you're going to get the difference based on context. But if you just hear one word at a time, this is the problem with dictation exercises and not knowing a lot of vocabulary words yet, is it's going to be really easy to mix these up. Don't worry about it, you'll get it as you go. But it's definitely one of the more challenging parts about Arabic, the difference between regular consonants and emphatic consonants. So this one is yasir, he goes or he marches. Yasir, he becomes. This one is a little more, or a little less subtle, rather. So sir, sir. You're going to pronounce the so a little bit differently, and then you're going to kind of hide the ya sound in your mouth. Yasir, yasir. And there are loads of tutorials on YouTube that you can use to get the difference between seen and sald, and then dal and dald, and the other 3 pairs of consonants as well. It's not that tricky to learn, it's just we don't do it in English, so it's a little bit difficult to understand. Here we have sibaha. So sibaha, and we have ta marbuta here, so it just sounds like a regular fatha. Sometimes it'll turn into a ta, and I'll go through the rules about that later on. You needn't worry about it right now. Sibaha is swimming, and sabah is morning. So usually context will give you the difference between those pretty clearly. Sibaha, sabah. The tone, the pitch of my voice deepens as we go. So that's the difference between seen and sald. It's pretty subtle. The difference between dal and dald is a little clearer. Here we have dar, and here we have dor, because you're not just deepening your voice, but you're pronouncing the D sound a little bit deeper in your throat. So dar, dor, darb, dorb, darb, dorb. So it's much more heavily pronounced D sound than da is. Whereas sald and seen outside of context sound pretty much alike. Yadur, yador. Yadur, yador. You can really hear the difference between dal and dald here. And here we have tahreed. Arabic loves to put sukoon over the letter ha, and you as an English speaker want to kind of not say it because we don't have H's in middles of words in English pretty typically, but you need to learn to do this. So tahreed, tahreed. And here we have the same, only dald. Tahreed, tahreed. So you can really hear the difference with dald and dal in a way that's a little more challenging with sald and seen. And here's a few examples of alif madda, which isn't a very common character, but it's worth getting to know. So eb is father, and its plural is aba. So this alif madda here is an alif bihamza, like over here, and then an alif after it, because you're making this word plural. In English, we usually just add s and maybe mess up the spelling of the end of the word a little bit to make a noun plural. In Arabic, we break it apart and put it back together, and this is definitely a challenge for novices like yourself. So eb is father. If you have more than one father, you have aba, really more than 2 fathers. I'll talk about duals later on. So usually this is metaphorical, of course. So eb, aba. Ra'i is opinion or view. It comes from the word for to see. So ra'i, ra'i. And here we have ara, ara. So here again, we break apart the word. These don't really look like singular and plural. They look quite different. And this is definitely a challenge for you as the new Arabic learner. When you learn a new noun, always learn its plural at the same time, because otherwise you're going to get stuck when you don't know the plural. So when I give you a new noun, when I give my students a new noun, I always give them the plural as well so they can memorize them together, because it's a little bit easier to do it that way. And now I'm cheating at the end. I'm giving you 2 letters you haven't had yet. This is qa, and here over here this is n, as in November. So Qur'an. Let me put my little dhamma here to make it clear. Quran. So the Quran, K-O-R-A-N usually in English, although we often begin it with a Q in English now. This is how we say it in Arabic. Quran. So alif madda is alif bihamza and then another long alif. Quran. And the root for to read is qaf. This letter's name is qaf, ra, and then hamza, because hamza can be a root letter. So anything with qaf, ra, hamza in it is to read something. The Quran is something that you read out loud, hence its name. So with that, I'm going to say ma salama. Congratulations on getting halfway through the alphabet.